Chapter 201. You mentioned points? Su Qi silently looked at his own points column. Player Su Buxian, current ranking in the Fantasy Universe Tournament. 1. Current points 103,912,839. The ranking battle is divided into 12 regions because the player base is huge, whether they are new players or rookies supported by various organizations or a large number of veteran internal test players. They all face the fiercest competition. The previous Netherworld King and Xia Shirley, although they seemed very impressive, in reality, they were just ordinary super rookies. After all, the matching mechanism was calculated based on Su Qi's original ranking. Out of 2,000 players, only 2 are super rookies, which can be considered a fish pond setup. However, the player names on the leaderboard can't be hidden. Su Qi's eyelids twitched. Not good. I'm going to get hammered. After all, Su Qi looked at the leaderboard. First place, Su Buxian, points 103,912,839. Second place, Penelope Bloom, points 913,123. Third place, Justice Sheriff, points 892,313. Su Qi had a feeling that this would stir up a frenzy online. But to be fair, I really didn't cheat this time. In the dim, barren world, where no birds would shit, immense and devoid of any life, it was truly a dead world. A shadowy figure stood on the horizon, its enormous shadow swirling up endless sand and dust. Dark spiritual energy surged like a tide, causing terrifying fluctuations. Upon closer inspection, one could see traces of plants on the ground, bodies of living things. But everything was being slowly absorbed, devoured, spreading across the entire planet. Sequence 2, slaughter, absorb, despair, life. The Yuhai Spirit King looked calmly at this desolate world. But it still seems hard to move to the next step. It seems I must borrow the power of the Elder, the great old gods, the Master of the Abyss. It had a fiery red mark on its body, which bore the totem of the evil god. But unlike ordinary believers, this totem was alive, rotating, emitting bursts of terrifying black fog. Each rotation seemed to release enormous amounts of twisted moral force. The terrible black fog gradually dyed blood red. A surge of pollution birthed within, spreading across this world. Spirit King, sir. A message was crossing the 10,000 realms. The Yuhai Spirit King frowned, his voice hoarse. What is it? The young master has had an accident. The other side's voice trembled, filled with a bit of fear and extreme disquiet. Yuhai Spirit King's eyes were deep and indifferent, listening to the other side's description, without a trace of fluctuation. He watched quietly as his special ability was activated. The originally barren world suddenly became a domain world of rolling dark sea tides. He stood beside a towering altar, releasing a vast amount of life force that had just been absorbed and slaughtered. Numerous patterns connected from the altar to the entire dark sea. This was one of his special abilities. Peeping. This was also why the force of Yuhai Spirit King was one of the 3 major intelligence organizations of the present world. Peeping could not only see distant worlds, see individual strength, but most importantly, it could also peer into fate. Yuhai Spirit King slightly closed his eyes, standing on the altar, his massive figure shadowed by countless shadows stretching out from the sea level. He was like a spider, standing at the center of a web, every wave through the net catching his attention. Terrifying dark energy was about to burst. The next moment, boom! The altar suddenly made a noise. Everything around changed. It seemed like a twisted space was breached. A vast network of veins stretched from it, dense and goosebump-inducing. These were the tracks of fate. Yuhai Spirit King remained expressionless, but his body was cracking inch by inch. Their kind, when using special abilities, could attain strength beyond their own, but at the same time would pay a great price. Fortunately, this entire world, which was once vibrant with life, has already paid its dues. Seconds later, Yuhai Spirit King's finger suddenly moved, seizing one of the myriad dense threads. His eyes flickered slightly. Strange. The gears of fate have changed. They are different from the previous display. Fate's trajectory was quantum fluctuations, not indicating a fixed destiny. But the peeping trait was to see the most likely trajectory from countless possibilities and factors. It would choose to constantly stack these trajectories, like strategizing on a board. Thus, it was like truly seeing the future. The unsettling undercurrents were impatient, but the trajectory that occurred had entirely changed. It was not as simple as just a butterfly's wings. There's someone interfering. In Yu-Hai Spirit King's mind, several figures emerged. In the present world, the only ones capable of this are likely. The divine beings were still not revived. Their devout believers were still hidden. The ancient powers were still in the ancient battlefield, unable to leave. There are no others who need to prevent this from happening, except that guy. Yu-Hai Spirit King's eyes revealed a bit of chill and dread. Traveling through the 10,000 realms, collecting traces, playing the game of changing fate with those weak creatures. Right? Now, it could only be him. Those who obstruct the great true God's unsealing must be cast into the depths of the dark sea, never to see the light of day again. Yu-Hai Spirit King issued the command. Let those strong ones search for young Master Yu-Hai. The child is not dead yet. Although Sunset Spirit King seems to be making moves, it must also set out. Chapter 202. After finding it, according to the original plan, send it to Anxious Land. I will rush to that place to treat it. Yes. The Yu-Hai Spirit King's entire domain of Dark Sea dissipated, and with a raise of its hand, it tore open a rift in the desolate world around it, and then stepped into the passage of nihility. Anxious Land, once a place where audiences with various divine took place. A monumental strength has been maintained to this day, still preventing countless powerful beings from entering. The rules have also been in operation for thousands of years. Now it is another era. Countless. The new era's destined ones entering the sequence are all likely to gather there. But, chuckled coldly, this is probably the last time. Night. In a dream. In Su-Chi's dream world, the third black shadow finally arrived. Gone. One. What do you think? Su-Chi looked at the clump of black fog huddling on the ground. This black fog had actually been there before when rescuing the Master of Destruction and during the fusion with the ancient god's heart. It had merged some from the surrounding old days black fog. It was still shapeless, devoid of consciousness. But now, after absorbing part of the black fog, it seemed to have changed. Gone in one, two black shadows, one in overalls and the other in a denim jacket, trembled slightly, with words directly manifesting beside their heads. Sect Hierarch. It seems to be from Lord Evil God's origin strength. And you? We are the fringes of Lord Evil God. Su-Chi slapped Gon and went directly to the ground. Keep calling him Lord Evil God. Seems you're still hung up on your former master, asking for a beating. Wasn't this your idea, Sect Hierarch? Do you have anything different? Gon and Wen silently stood up. It currently does not have much self-awareness. It is more like a newly born creature, Sect Hierarch. You can consider it as a beast. Su-Chi looked at this dark creature. A black beast? Anyway, let's name it Chui. You will be the 3 generals of my shadow army. Gone. 1. There's no 4th member in this army. Training them devilishly every day in the room, even having to memorize ancient texts and military strategies, and punishment if not completed. Looks like tonight will be more of the same. But, at least one, or rather one beast had joined. Su-Chi wasn't idle either. While they trained, he continued researching methods to take them into the instance which now seemed promising. They were like the mixed fish piano, all sentient, considered a more advanced type of pollutant. After all, their former master was the evil god, who also controlled every believer's totem and lifeline, serving both as the strength provider and a symbiotic supervisor. Of course, now they were all his Su Buxian soldiers. And by using the spiritual eyes to connect the channels, it seems possible to summon them in the instance. Su Qi decided to find a chance next time to summon all three, given that Gon and when under his special training now had significantly increased strength. Why not put them to work if not for his own salary? Forgot never had a salary before. Just wonder what those cultists would think. Seeing this, and after their increase in strength, they never thought of rebelling. First, because resistance was futile. They saw their sect hierarch as deep as a pond, and after merging into the spiritual eyes, there was also a compelling oppressive force. Second, because they had been completely transformed by the sect hierarch's mighty sanctity. Occasionally chatting about the hustlers' dreams of the future seemed more promising than their former evil god boss. The night slowly passed. Su Qi could now sense in his dreams what time it was. When to wake up. When he opened his eyes, the sky was already turning white. Su Qi picked up his phone, and he found a bunch of people had sent him a barrage of messages overnight. Brother Su. Seems like topping the leaderboard really did set off fireworks. So many came to congratulate first thing. But he opened the messages. You've been smashed for cheating. Chapter 203-166 Just practice more. If you can't afford to lose, don't play. Su Qi opened the official forum. Upon entering the page, he saw a prominently highlighted post with his ID Su Buxian, displayed in blazing red. Never assume it's a good thing when your ID shows up prominently. Could be a Hall of Fame or it could be an open box list. The post's title was, Please, Authorities Step In, Thoroughly Inspect the First Place in the Fantasy Universe Tournament Ranking, Su Buxian. The post had over 100,000 replies. Numerous players were petitioning, sharing their opinions below. Points over 100 million? Couldn't they even pretend? Either there's a bug, or there's major cheating going on. It's ridiculous. They had just left the instance. This time the point accumulation system, although each region, each instance rule differed, a gap existed between those without abilities and those with abilities, but damn, the second place is 100 times behind the first. If this isn't cheating, what is? This guy named Su Buxian, I've never heard of him. Strongly suggest a thorough investigation. Expose this Su Buxian, and then ban him. That, before you expose him, can you contact me? I'll pay for the cheat. Oh. A lot of skeptical voices arose. Of course, some people remained neutral or spoke up for him. Since opening, Abyssal Paradise has never had any cheats. Although the data is indeed a bit exaggerated, everyone should view it rationally. Whose alt account? Stop defending. Su Qi watched the comments with great interest. Most replies were clearly from ordinary players, who didn't really understand the true back end of Abyssal Paradise. The real insiders from the Paradise's factions and organizations generally wouldn't raise doubts, because they deeply knew cheats like this couldn't appear in this game. Su Qi wasn't in a rush. If speaking only of Night City's point rules, his points were completely normal, having taken down Black Emperor and Giles Crowd's entire assets, conquered the illegal land, seized Life Group, taken down Nancy, and all transactions with cyber coins in the courier system counted as revenue. Although the points were exaggerated, they were entirely legitimate. In the rankings of other 12 regions, although there were also many exaggerated scores, with many exceeding 1 million, now all the attention had shifted to Su Qi. Brother Su, how did you actually do it? Night Guardian couldn't help his curiosity, having just returned from cultivation with greatly increased strength. He had an exceptionally impressive performance in the ranking battles, reaching the top 100 with nearly 200,000 points. He had intended to show off to Su Qi. As a result, he hadn't expected to be smacked in the face by a string of numbers. Didn't you see all the players saying I was cheating? Night Guardian remained silent. He wasn't unaware of the situation in Abyssal Paradise. Naturally, he wouldn't take Su Qi's words seriously. Anyway, Brother Su, you've become famous. Then I better start live streaming soon. Night Guardian sighed helplessly. That's not the kind of fame you want. Being famous is a good thing in itself, but under these circumstances, Brother Su, you're likely to face a swell of skepticism and even malicious challenges. You need to be cautious now. A high ranking also means high risk now that everyone has accumulated points, and each can see their own rankings and can't hide them. The implications were evident. Fortunately, the Add Friend function wasn't enabled. Otherwise, Su Chi's friends requests box would surely be overflowing. It seems there are quite a few people who want to beat me up. Su Chi muttered to himself. Physically beat him. All right, Brother Su, I'm gonna head out, prepare well. This ranking battle is really important, Night Guardian said quickly before leaving. The two weren't in the same region, and many familiar faces Su Chi met were also dispersed. As the matchmaking system was temporarily closed during the ranking battles, so most people were waiting for the countdown to end. Aside from posts about themselves, there were also many discussions about Paradise, Present World, all realms. After the expansion pack was released, they officially encountered the world view of Abyssal Paradise for the first time, seeing a different totality from before. Su Chi estimated that the time was almost right, then chose to eat well before logging into the game. Some friends, on the other hand, were sending him messages. Sun Xiaohuan, Sword White Clothes, Left Hand, Qing Lang, Cheng Feng, Bai Changwei, among others. Everyone was sending them, so no worries. It seemed he really got famous. And aside from those inquiring, marveling, more were reminders, and pulling him into factions again. Brother Su, your points have attracted the attention of major factions. Be careful. There are many dangerous individuals and organizations in your region now. Probably they all have their eyes on you. Brother Su, as a solo player, your situation may become tricky. Why not join my Dragon God Club? We have power in paradise. We can protect you. This was Left Hand, and he hadn't given up. Su Chi replied acrimoniously. He didn't mind whether he became famous before entering paradise, but from the mechanics of this ranking battle, becoming famous was sooner or later. Having many skeptics and dangers was quite normal. However, being targeted by various factions in paradise, as per the information previously obtained from Left Hand, many powerful organizations and individuals in paradise, each defended a corner, owning shrines to shelter other worlds, and having contacts or even collaborations with forces in the present world. Of course, these certainly couldn't compare to entities like Spirit King, but anything that could shelter even 3 or 4 worlds counted as no small organization and could also garner many resources, including spirit coins. Chapter 204. This was also the reason why Su Chi established the Hustlers' Chamber of Commerce in Night City. He couldn't keep making things up. The Hustlers needed their own power base. Brother Su, are you sure you don't want to reconsider? Left Hand sighed, still not giving up. Then let me reveal something else to you. The information from last time was actually concealed. This ranking battle will ultimately take place in a location called Anxious Land. That place has a lot of restrictions, although my current permissions aren't enough to know the specifics. But many internal test players, high sequence players from Paradise, even chose to voluntarily die, to be kicked out of Paradise, just to compete for the qualification to re-enter Anxious Land. Many of them, in the real sense, are monsters, once formidable beings. Su Chi pondered. Sounds pretty impressive, pretty dangerous. Of course. Left Hand almost burst into tears, finally making this guy feel the urgency. But Su Chi paused. Do they have more points than me? Left Hand. Damn you. Talking like this, you're going too far. Those digits of yours are already beyond reasonable limits. Bastard. Finally, Left Hand let out a deep sigh. Forget it. I give up, but Brother Su, good luck. Even though we're not in the same area, I still hope we can both make it to Anxious Land, into paradise. After all, we're friends. Despite the tangled interests, they could still be considered friends who had been through thick and thin together. All right, I'll accept this friend card. Next time you encounter the Hustlers, you can use my name for a huge 9.9% discount. Oh, Left Hand complained. What kind of discount is that? And also, it's meaningless. It's better if you just give me some points. I don't want much, just the change will do. Even though it was a joke, points are not transferable after all, but Left Hand couldn't resist checking to see just how much change Su Chi had. Su Buxian's current points. 103,912,839. Just the change amounts to over 3 million. knocking those at the top of the rankings powerless. Woohoo, so envious. Left hand's defense broke, and he hung up the call. Su Qi wondered, I didn't even say anything, why'd he leave? However, Left Hand was quite sincere this time, delivering information similar to others, all cautioning him of the danger, but with some previously undisclosed details. Su Qi glanced at the remaining time before the ranking battle began. He walked over to the lottery box. He still had one lottery draw he hadn't used, a reward from the ranking battle unlike any before because this time, the lottery mechanism looked at points. Moreover, at this stage, it wouldn't produce any ordinary items. There was a very high chance it was related to spiritual energy, as seen from the posts on the forum where many people were openly showcasing their items. They weren't showing off, but selling, understanding that some players lack the abilities to excel and instead trade to make a living. Let's see how much value these 1 billion points of mine have. Su Qi chose to draw from the lottery, and the next moment, the lottery box became exceedingly abnormal. It initially had no patterns on it, but now markings began to etch themselves into it. Zzzzz. The sound of friction carried throughout the personal space, with black fog emerging around the room. Su Qi's eyelids twitched as he looked at the box. The lines were being carved deeper and deeper, extremely intricate and elaborate, an eerie aura surging from within. Patterns like these Su Qi had seen before. They resembled arrays often not used in immediate combat, requiring time to lay out, trace, along with a large investment of resources. Like when young Master Spirit King needed to teleport away, there must be a powerful being tracing the lines, opening a pathway, even though this ability wasn't yet available to players. But clearly, there would inevitably be contact later. As the friction sound grew more intense and the patterns kept flashing dark red light, they spread from the box to the entire room. Densely packed, the room was filled with patterns. I have a bad feeling about this. The whole lottery box along with the room started to tremble uncontrollably. Like a pressure cooker, a massive amount of black fog burst forth. Don't do this, box bro. Su Qi had no choice but to lean against the wall as the whole room vehemently shook even more fiercely, and he noticed a significant amount of black fog swirling outside the window. Hiss, terror, pollution, abnormalities. It was as if a massive amount of filth had been drawn in, or perhaps his own room had been transported into some horrific place. He was just simply drawing a lottery. Was all this pomp and circumstance really necessary? He didn't know how much time had passed. It was only then that Su Qi felt the shaking of the room come to a halt, and looking out the window, what he saw was twisted darkness, unbearable to gaze upon. Even with his extremely high spiritual power, just one look made him feel as if he were plummeting into the abyss. Good grief. Su Qi's eyes trembled slightly, feeling a lethal danger outside the room, as if he had arrived in some dreadfully formidable place. And the patterns in the room continued to flicker intensely. They seemed to be extending outward, stirring the surrounding black fog incessantly. This is definitely not the same as the lotteries before. Su Qi couldn't see clearly, but he could guess that these patterns extending out seemed to be attempting to grasp something. Before, it was more like drawing items from the warehouse of the 10,000 realms to be delivered to the player. Now, I've been brought directly to some dangerous place to capture something on the spot. And moreover, boom, boom, boom. The room was as if it were being hit by endless, intense fluctuations, causing the entire personal space to tremble wildly. And Su Qi had no choice but to tightly grip onto a support, or else he would have been flung out directly. I've come to understand something. This place was absolutely extraordinary. And these patterns, they're clearly formed to protect the room from shattering. This lottery draw, indeed, as Su Qi had anticipated, was completely different. After all, points in the hundreds of millions, unprecedented. However, the process was also indescribably arduous. Around 10 minutes later, Su Qi slowly relaxed his grip on the support and landed on the ground, muttering, "Those 10+ minutes reminded me of the secret operation in 99, jumping into a vortex black hole with a shuttle to fend off aliens. After all, for the entire 10 minutes, This personal space was on the run, as if it were being pursued by countless black fog phantoms, constantly bursting forth with terrifying, substantial, and lethal attacks. But they were all blocked by the power of paradise. However, fortunately, they had now escaped that lethal danger zone. The room's patterns had also dissipated completely, leaving behind only that lottery box, glittering brightly, seemingly waiting for Su Qi to open it as if to claim credit for its work. Su Qi walked over and placed his hand on the box. Upon opening it, a brilliant light burst out with a thunderous, resonant tremor. Such powerful light. Could it be? Snap! Su Qi silently observed a cross pendant that appeared on his chest. At the same time, a message popped up before his eyes. Name, Angel. Descending tribute. Type. Spiritual power technique / ancient relic. Quality. Legend. Spiritual power consumption. 1000. Function. Using this skill will grant you the traits of the angel race, lasting for 1 minute, with a 10-minute cooldown. Current stage. Single-winged angel. Can collect related items for upgrades. Note. By the name of the divine, a tribute of descent, a powerful tribe lies dormant in the land of sleep. They once looked down upon all, a great existence admired by countless people. One day, they will awaken again, making their descent into the present world. Su Qi's expression paused slightly. Divine again? Chapter 205 Finally. It's to my taste. Su Qi looked at the various pieces of information above. The type included ancient relics. Now, even though it can be used as a spiritual power technique, since it's an ancient relic, that means it can later be integrated into the ancient god's heart to become a permanent trait. Su Qi pondered thoughtfully, suddenly pausing. Wait, do I have too many divine ancient relics on me? The heart of an ancient god, the wings of an angel, and also the eyes given by the evil god. As for the phoenix feather, it was a close call, but it excelled with its powerful recovery abilities, and I have also made a bunch of feathers, optimizing the life potions, reducing the side effects, and adding new traits which are now a characteristic new product of the Hustler's Chamber of Commerce. Not only can it help me delay the symptoms of Sigong soon, but it can also be sold across all realms, and it's constantly updated and improved through big data analysis by subsystems. And this thing. Su Qi held an object wrapped and pulsing with countless iron bars. Atomic heart. Quality. Perfect. Function. Sequence path guidance. Can perform matching keyword searches. Each use requires the consumption of spirit coins corresponding to the sequence. Note. The sequence path has countless pathways, developed over innumerable years. Like chains, they connect to the divine ancient relics. But to step-by-step overcome these shackles and approach the altar of God is no easy feat. Different sequence paths have different ascension conditions, all being paths carved out over countless years. The so-called altar seems to also be related to becoming a god. Of course, for now, it seems far beyond reach, otherwise, there wouldn't be so many people stuck at a certain sequence, making no progress. And I'm completely different, the Bushin path. The chain in my hand still connects to nihility, with no direction ahead and no way back. I'll take a look after entering the instance. Su Qi put it away. This room in the personal space is special, restricting the use of all skills, equipment, tools, and so on. Many skills, once acquired, need to be practiced after entering the instance. As for the use of the atomic heart requiring spirit coins, I currently don't have any. If I had known, I would have taken down that casino in Linyuan land directly. According to the wage standard of Pure Land City at the time, earning more than 100 spirit coins a day was considered a good income. But working a job was out of the question. The Hustler's Chamber of Commerce is expanding. The seeds sown, the nets cast, all are sprouting and growing in different worlds over time. Time's up. Su Qi watched the countdown for the ranked battle. Yesterday, all players, whether they entered early or late, had their exit time from the instance unified. At this moment, everyone would enter at the same time. And then, a message popped up. Please take note, all players, The following match will enter the final stage of ranked battles. Players who are forced to quit or are eliminated can wait for the end of the ranked battles, and all changes, notifications, etc., will be announced and explained within the instance. Suchi paused briefly. So it means once I go in, when I come out, the ranked battle will be over. Wait, I just remembered I haven't washed the pot back in reality yet. And the next moment, a compelling force descended, leaving the players no choice. A vast tide of darkness swallowed all the light in the room, leaving no room for resistance or hesitation. One could only hear a strange laugh, not a malicious kind, but like someone leaning against a window, staring intently at you. Welcome to the abyss. Cold and trembling, Suchi hadn't yet opened his eyes but could hear someone whispering nearby. Sir. He opened his eyes. In his field of vision was a lady in an air stewardess uniform, bending down trying to persuade a guy decked out in a big gold chain and a small wristwatch not to use his cell phone for calls on the plane. Suchi turned his head, looking outside at the vast clouds mingling with the blue sky. It seemed he was on an airplane this time. And before Suchi could take a closer look, a message popped up. Please note, the identities of players in this instance. IDs will be hidden in the initial phase. Initial phase? Hidden? That means it will be revealed later, and from what this message says, there must be other players in this instance too. Suchi looked around the airplane. The system could hide player IDs, but not question marks. Suchi could discern the true identities of the players. However, it seems like there are none around me right now. And the question now is, where is this plane headed? Suchi felt his pockets all empty. It seemed that although he was on the plane, no additional information was provided, which could mean, is the content on the plane unrelated to the main storyline? Not important. And his location was in the economy class with seats closely packed, people around him either napping or reading newspapers, watching movies to pass the time. Strange. If Suchi wasn't mistaken, they were all ordinary people. At the same time, his item slot, skill bar, levels, etc., were all unrestricted. Everything seemed calm, without a ripple. Bro, can we swap seats? The man sitting by the window looked pale as he turned to Suchi. I'm scared of heights. Sitting by the window is really getting to me. Suchi noticed the question mark above his head. It showed he was feeling nauseous and dizzy, and if it continued, he would likely throw up. Chapter 206. Okay. Suchi. Alright, we can switch. After switching seats, the man's condition seemed to have improved a lot. Meanwhile, Suchi could also look out the window, enveloped by the clouds, and even glimpse the miniature landscape below through the gaps. His gaze narrowed slightly, growing stranger. The orderly cluster of cities and the familiar, unaffected terrain, the gentle landscape, and the ordinary people around. This world is incredibly normal. Normal, but somehow abnormal. Suchi leaned back in his seat. In the instances he had experienced before, there had always been either a killing demon or some abnormality, with an almost consistent start to eerie elements. And now, everything was extremely calm. This gave Suchi a strange sense of discomfort. It seemed there were no hijackers or dangerous individuals on the plane, appearing to be just an ordinary flight. The greatest disturbance might be the pale-faced man beside him, whose body was still trembling slightly. You! Suchi eyed him and spoke with a bit of anticipation. Are you about to transform? The man. What transformation? The man seemed perplexed for a moment. Sigh. It really seemed like his fear and anxiety were genuinely showing. Suchi was rather disappointed. I'm just still a bit scared. You have such severe fear of heights, and you still fly? I had no choice. I had to go on a business trip and could only take a plane. It wasn't this severe before. The man gave a wry smile. But recently, I've heard about many plane disappearances and crashes, so now I've become like this. Really? Suchi paused. Actually, fear of heights isn't such a big deal. If you divert your attention, you can completely relieve your current symptoms. Like when we started talking just now, Your body subconsciously stopped trembling. The man was startled. It seems true. Now that we've been chatting for a bit, I do feel a little more relaxed. So now we should talk about something more pleasant. Great. The man readily agreed. Talk about what? Let's talk about those plane crash incidents. The man suddenly choked, his face full of question marks. How is that a pleasant topic? Bringing up the exact thing he's trying to avoid, right? The man sighed, seeing that the other party was very interested, and in light of the fact that Su Chi had given up his seat, he began to speak with a pale face. From what I understand, there are quite a few planes that suddenly lose their signal during the flight, and then they never appear again. There was once an aircraft wreckage found at sea, with no survivors inside, just an old notebook with words written in blood, recounting bizarre, twisted experiences, as if witnessing great horrors. Su Chi interrupted. Do you know the contents? I do, but there are many versions. However, the beginning is similar. The person who first discovered the notebook is named Xiao Shuai. Su Chi looked at him. That sounds somewhat familiar. The man coughed. Because I read it from social media and clickbait accounts, but the story spread widely. All right, go on. Su Chi listened to the man's narrative. The most authentic version is that the plane entered a devil's dark land. All the passengers heard terrible shrieks and saw horrifying monsters, a twisted sky, and eventually made an emergency landing on a patch of flatland. But when the survivors left the plane, they found themselves turning into monsters, their bodies undergoing constant changes. That blood writing seems to be either a cry for help or a warning. The man shivered as he said this. You see, now you can understand my fear, right? After all, hearing all this would scare anyone normal, wouldn't it? Su Chi's eyes narrowed slightly. Shouldn't normal people feel excitement and curiosity upon hearing these things? And this version sounds so familiar, like a polluted world, and the body even undergoes transformations, unavoidably reminding him of the second instance he experienced, and the tentacle man. But, regarding the content from social media and clickbait accounts, Su Chi felt their credibility was very low, or rather, extremely low. Is there any official confirmation or direct public evidence of this news? Seems not. But the clickbait accounts claim they confirmed it with the people involved. The person involved is Sister Yang Yang, right? The credibility is about to drop to zero. The man helplessly retorted. Just think of it as a story I made up. Anyway, this version is the most authentic, and whenever it appears online, it gets deleted. Su Chi paused. Deleted. The credibility just jumped to 90%. The man? And Su Chi looked around. Have you noticed how good our pilot is? Ha! The man blinked, slightly taken aback. Su Chi pointed outside. It's the first time I've seen a plane diving towards a thundercloud. The sky around the plane was still bright azure, but ahead was a vast expanse of dark storm clouds, the rumbling of electricity flashing. Everything around was dark and gloomy. It was as if a terrifying monster was opening its gaping maw, wanting to devour everything. And this plane was flying uncontrollably forward. The man's eyes widened. The next moment, the light surrounding the plane vanished. The fuselage involuntarily shook, the cabin lights flickered, and the dark atmosphere made many passengers realize something was amiss. What's going on? Why did it suddenly go dark? And what's up with the plane? It's shaking so violently. The sky outside was clear just a moment ago. People started to panic, all turning their gaze outside. And then, a slightly unnatural voice came from the plane's control room. Ladies and gentlemen, the plane has encountered unexpected severe airflow and storm conditions beyond our predictions. But please don't worry, stay seated, and fasten your seatbelts to prevent injury from the turbulence. The man trembled slightly. Why do I have a bad feeling about this? Relax. The announcement was wrong. It's not about any thundercloud or bad weather. Really? Of course. We're obviously not in the same world anymore. Su Chi watched the world's dome outside already completely dark. various twisted and peculiar anomalies slowly seeping through, terrible gales howling, and numerous shrieks faintly bursting. Shit! The man suddenly widened his eyes, his body shaking uncontrollably. He tried to stand up but was restrained by the seatbelt. Many passengers also noticed that something was wrong, their expressions becoming increasingly panicked. "Something's off, folks. This is not just a thundercloud. I saw twisted vortexes. Could it be that the incident rumored online is true?" The man now had no color in his lips and finally stammered. "It's true. It's true. We have entered here too. We're approaching that terrifying vortex." Everyone screamed. The man, shaking, yelled at the flight attendant, "Turn away. Get away from there. Otherwise, we'll get sucked in and never be able to return." The flight attendant, equally stunned, could only try to reassure everyone based on her professional training. "Please do not panic. Stay in your seats. The pilot will navigate the plane safely into a safe zone." Bang! The turbulence of the plane grew fiercer. Su Chi, however, had a clearer view from the window, as a large amount of polluted and twisted air was enveloping everything. "What do we do? What do we do?" The man's voice quivered, his face deathly pale. "Our only chance is to avoid it. But can this plane even steer clear of that area? About that, you no longer need to worry or be tense." Su Chi paused. "The plane lost all its signals half a minute ago, and from the look of things, it's lost control too. And you're still so calm." The man wanted to scream out, but at that moment, with a loud bang, it was as if a giant hand slapped the plane. Everyone felt their bodies shift, and the violent shaking made it impossible for him to speak. Boom! 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 Terror followed terror, as everyone could clearly feel the tilt in their bodies. The entire plane had completely lost control, carried into the vortex by the countless twisted gales. "It's over. We're dead. I didn't even get a chance to leave a will." "Oh!" The plane was in an uncontrollable dive, screams of terror and the approach of fatal danger attacking everyone. The intense turbulence instilling fear and despair in everyone. The bizarre and polluted air was uncontrollably seeping through, bursting forth, and the strange shrieks and pollution were vaguely nearing the plane's windows. Only Su Chi calmly sat in his seat, taking a sip of his coffee, settling down. Now it finally tastes right. Chapter 207. The Justice League targets Su Buxian. The plane had already been devoured by countless distortions. How should one describe the scene witnessed now? Su Chi's gaze was fixed on the outside of the plane. He felt as if he had returned to his personal space, traveling through numerous channels filled with pollution and nihility, with black fog surging chaotically like chaos. The windows around him had become utterly opaque, as if he were in a strange land devoid of any light. Nihility! It reminded Su Chi of the channels opened by rituals performed by the powerhouses he had seen at the Stars Hall, among which terrifying currents swarmed. The entire plane had been sucked into a vortex as vast as a black hole, and no one knew what would happen next. At this moment, everyone on the plane had passed out. The terrifying screams and the spiritual impact brought by the pollution had directly caused their mental collapse, and massive amounts of eerie, twisted black fog were seeping in through the cracked crevices. After all, they were all ordinary people. Even if other players were in this situation, they'd probably black out, lose consciousness. Su Chi's spiritual energy surged. His base attribute plus the sequence enhancement had pushed his spiritual power to 10,000. His frightfully high spiritual power allowed him to remain conscious even in this situation. However, there was no additional information. Rather, as long as he stared at the black fog, it would start screaming frantically as if startled, emitting a massive sense of distortion and weirdness like a tide, as if it would endlessly strengthen, then gather a massive amount of black fog and shadows, coming from a distant unknown place. It seemed to devour Su Chi, and at the same time he also saw a deep red question mark, reminding him of everything. "Do not look directly. So sensitive?" Before the distortion crazily gathered and burst, Su Chi could only close his eyes. This kind of prohibition against direct viewing was not new to him. In the previous projections of the ancient battlefield at Linyuan land, he had seen many extraordinary things, but in this dangerous situation it was slightly different. Looking once or twice may be sustainable, but the longer he looked, the more terrifying and weird things it would attract. Unless he could withstand it with his own strength in the future. But now it was too far away. A mass of deadly dangerous aura seemed to devour him. And once he closed his eyes, it was like blocking all senses. He felt as if his body didn't exist. Every other sensation completely vanished. Time passed by seconds and minutes. He didn't know how long had passed. Su Chi's senses gradually returned, and sounds reached his ears. He slowly opened his eyes. The plane had landed, and the hull had cracked everywhere. All windows were already shattered. Given the situation, ordinary people would likely not have survived, but Su Chi scanned around. Not a single person was dead, all were still alive. It's like being protected by some force. And Su Chi narrowed his eyes, observing changes in the bodies of the people. Some people were slowly coming to, each holding their heads as if they had splitting headaches. My head. It hurts so much. Has the plane landed? Are we still alive? Wait. Something feels off. The man next to Su Chi also trembled slightly, then slowly opened his eyes, looked around blankly, and then screamed in terror. Ah! Monsters! Everyone froze, noticing the man and others around them on the seats, screaming. Every person on the plane had undergone changes. Some had terrifying faces growing on their arms, others had iron spikes penetrating their bodies, yet others had bloodied hands growing on their heads. An assortment of horrors. Absolutely chilling. Su Chi held the shoulder of the frightened, struggling man next to him and calmly said, "Calm down. After all, you've also turned into a monster." The man was stunned, looked down, and only then noticed strange patterns on his chest, like burns. What in the world is happening? People finally began to realize their situation, looking terrified at one another. Why have our bodies transformed like this? And where exactly are we? Where did we crash? There's no signal on the mobile phones either. Outside the plane windows was a terrifying deep red, a faintly spreading eerie fog, blurring the distant view, but chilly enough to make everyone shudder. And in a corner, seated alone without speaking or showing any emotion, a middle-aged man now slightly raised his head, his expression solemn as he spoke. Passed through twisted visions, infected by strangeness, everyone undergoes terrible transformations. Help! Help! This place is full of horrors. People were stunned, unsure why the middle-aged man would say such things. But the man's body trembled slightly, his eyes widened. That's from that notebook. The man looked at the middle-aged man. You've looked into it too? The middle-aged man did not answer but looked at the face on his right arm. Instead, with a probing gaze, he said solemnly, I never thought I'd actually encounter it. By this time, 6 people stood up, each with a refined aura, and their muscular build and movements carried a menacing presence. Someone looked at the middle-aged man. Captain, what do we do now? Stick to the prepared plan, the middle-aged man spoke. This person nodded, pulling out a badge from his pocket, his voice carrying weight. Everyone, we are from the National Emergency Response Department. Please remain calm now. Chapter 208. Crew members, first check if anyone is injured, unconscious, and cooperate with the emergency response. Everyone, please do not move around to avoid danger. The presence of national security personnel on site calmed the crowd quite a bit. Yet the underlying fear remained, and the noise was incessant. What the hell is going on? Why has this happened to us? Where on earth have we crashed? They were doing their best to soothe the passengers and work with the crew to check on people in the other compartments. Su Chi didn't bother with the clamor but instead looked strangely at his own palm. He too had mutated, with an eye in the center of his palm. He muttered to himself, the palm eye, huh? The second instance he had experienced, that same abnormality had appeared, an eye growing in the center of the palm. He hadn't expected to see it again now. That's right. A man's trembling voice came from beside Su Chi. He looked outside. This is the place where all the plane crashes occurred, the horrifying world recorded in that survivor's notebook. We can't go back. Not necessarily, Su Chi paused. In my view, the possibility of you returning could be as high as 3%. The man? What's the difference between that and not being able to go back at all? 3%. That's considered high by my standards. Usually, I believe that 0.1% signifies being prepared to risk it all. The man? Are you some kind of wire-walking trapeze artist? It's remarkable that you can still crack jokes with such calmness. He looked shakily at his chest. Now everyone has undergone bizarre mutations and become strange monsters. No one knows what will turn into next. You should feel fortunate about that. The man was startled and looked at Su Chi. Why? Su Chi tapped the window filled with cracks. Because ordinary people simply can't survive in this world. He was all too familiar with their transformed appearances. They were less monsters and more accurately described as abnormalities. Most abnormalities come with twisted, strange changes, symbolizing a kind of ability. After being polluted, either one withstands it and steps into the sequence, or one becomes a completely mindless pollution monster. In any case, this is a pollution-type instance. Su Chi looked out into the mist and silently mused to himself. An unknown world, the reappearance of the palm eye, ordinary people becoming abnormalities, and other players. The jumbled threads had just begun to unfurl, not yet connected end to end. One step at a time. At this very moment, everyone aboard had been accounted for, with 5 injured but all with minor injuries. The common denominator was that all had mutated. So, what's the situation now? What should we do? Can we get in touch with rescue services? The crowd looked at these officials, hope shining in their eyes. Ladies and gentlemen. A middle-aged man stood up, his voice conveying a hint of gravity as he spoke, extending his hand to take out a piece of communication equipment. Ladies and gentlemen, I am a national security personnel, and this device in my hand is a satellite phone, which means I can make contact from anywhere in the world. The crowd's spirits lifted, and the next moment, the middle-aged man slowly placed the communication tool on the seat in front of him. But I'm sorry, it currently has no signal. His voice was grave as he announced this cruel reality. This means that we are all currently in another world. The bodies of the people trembled slightly, fear and despair appearing in their eyes. How could this be? Another world? How is that possible? The middle-aged man looked at the people. I know this is a difficult and hard to accept piece of news, but please stay calm and trust us. There's still hope for us all to return to our original world. The key is to remain united and survive together. Su Chi observed the middle-aged man. It seemed the man knew quite a bit about this world, and his identity and tone provided the others with some calm and hope. However, the situation to come may not follow their will. Su Chi gazed into the surrounding fog. There was the sound of running footsteps softly crossing over. His spiritual power was sufficient to penetrate the mist and sense the movement in the distance. From the speed and sound of the footsteps, it seemed the approaching creature was no benign entity. Something is approaching from outside. Without needing a warning from Su Chi, a young man whose ears had become like trumpets spoke with bewilderment. I think I hear heavy footsteps. It's moving fast. The middle-aged man's expression darkened, looking outside. A few seconds later, what is this? A 3-legged monster, covered in blood-stained bandages, was rapidly coming towards them. Its red eyes filled with a frightening, abnormal glare. The people shuddered. What on earth is that monster? It's lunging at us. Watch out! Around the airplane, trench after trench had appeared. The fuselage was compromised, and people were huddled together, with many standing on the edge of the brakes. Seeing this, they all ran back in horror. After all, The appearance of the three-legged beast was far too unsettling. Yet some roared out, "What's there to fear? It's just one. Let's take it on." The middle-aged man and his colleagues did not hesitate, charging forward quickly. "Let's go for it!" Only by dealing with this creature could they ensure the safety of the people and achieve cooperation. Otherwise, the journey ahead would be even more difficult. Su Qi watched all this unfold without lending a hand. Everyone had become monsters. Regarding their physical condition and additional abilities, they were more than a match for a single three-legged monster. They didn't need his help. Thus, the three-legged monster was about to be mobbed by justice. Chapter 209. Everyone felt the heightened strength in their bodies and the abilities brought by their abnormal changes. "We seem different now. That monster doesn't seem too strong." Everyone felt a bit excited, and they also saw hope. But in the next moment, numerous footsteps densely approached. More than 20 pollution monsters shrieked, their impact stronger than the earlier three-legged monster, their eerie aura making everyone tremble again. A man's eyes widened. Why are there more? The noise of the plane crash is enough to attract monsters from kilometers around. Su Qi sipped his coffee lightly. But it seems it has also attracted rescue. Another team was rapidly approaching. About a dozen people. They held various cold weapons in their hands, nearly matching the speed of the monsters. Their expressions stern as they skillfully controlled their abilities, and quickly slew more than 20 pollution monsters. "You are..." The middle-aged man looked slightly stunned. The leader of the abnormality spoke solemnly. "Now's not the time for explanations. Everyone, gather as much as you can from the plane, such as food, water, usable electronic devices, etc., and find something that can be used as a weapon. Then get ready to leave with us immediately, or more dangers will be attracted here." People hadn't expected there to be others here, although they all seemed mutated just like them. It seemed they were companions. "Hurry up. 1 minute." The man quickly started rummaging through his bag, but couldn't help looking at Su Qi, who was sitting still, and shouted, "Stop calmly drinking your coffee." He had been holding back for a long time. He was drinking when the three-legged monster came, drinking when more than 20 monsters appeared. Now they were about to run. And he was still drinking. "You only have 1 minute, aren't you going to take something with you?" Even a stick would do. They felt their strength had increased and had undergone some changes, but clearly, this world was fraught with danger. They needed to at least find weapons for self-defense. "Actually," Su Qi spread his palm. "This palm eye is enough." The man startled. "What is its ability? Can it create an attack with lethal force like mine does?" "You seem to have already figured it out. You're very close." Su Qi allowed the palm eye to emit twinkling light. "It emits light." The man. He fell silent for 2 seconds, then shouted, "What the hell use is that?" Well said. When Su Qi initially acquired the item, he had the same thought, but now that it had returned to his hand, he might as well see what further developments could be made. "Everyone, follow us quickly. Make sure not to make any noise, don't wander off, do not use your abilities at will, and listen to our commands, or you will bear the consequences." The leader of the abnormal team, Bald, spoke with gravity. He was the authoritative figure of the group, with a red valve growing on the back of his head, holding a bone-cutting knife in his hand. In the past minute, they had slain over 10 sporadic pollution monsters that lunged at them. The team started to move. The only certain thing now, this was a pollution instance, and the main plot and worldview were still unknown. But since it was the final stage of the ranked battle, some big movements might be expected. "And other players, seems I've met another one." Su Qi looked towards that young man in Bald's team. This person was a player. He didn't need to use a question mark to discover it, as during the battle, the man had openly used skills, equipment, etc., apparently not planning to hide. And the others seemed to have sensed something too, smiling faintly at him. All right. Su Qi smiled amiably in return. This person had also recognized his identity, sensing the fluctuations of a skill that probed the range of abilities. The young man whispered to Bald, then retreated to Su Qi's side, his gaze lightly resting on Su Qi, quietly saying, The other chuckled lightly. Didn't expect to see another player among so many people here. And you seem very surprised about how you were discovered. The other seemed talkative and imaginative. Given that I have a skill that can probe within a range, any person's condition is exposed. Everyone except you was affected, indicating you blocked it with your spiritual energy, which also proves you're a player. That complicated? Su-Chi. I thought you could tell from my uniquely sunny and cheerful demeanor. The young man, he got choked up, unexpectedly not knowing how to respond. Anyway, the young man paused. I have no hostility and I'm here to invite you to join our player alliance. Su-Chi paused, asking, Alliance? What alliance? Had he missed something again? Was there already an alliance? The young man paused. It seems you don't know yet, but I think you'll be very interested. Before entering the game, we formed a coalition to target first place in points and to sanction that player named Su Buxian. The Justice League. Chapter 210 somehow familiar again. When Su-Chi heard him finish speaking, he paused slightly. Oh? Targeting me, the Justice League, and inviting me personally to participate? I have to say, you have a good eye for people. How about it? Are you interested? It is a bit intriguing, but are there many people entering the Justice League? Of course, the young man said softly. On one hand, many want to sanction him for suspect actions such as using cheats to inflate data, since those points are just too outrageous. Many people won't accept such a sudden upstart. Indeed, Su-Chi nodded in agreement. On the other hand, during the final stage of the ranking battle, there will inevitably be final rankings, and points are an important basis for obtaining the final positions and qualifications, so there will be extremely fierce competition and killing. The young man paused. With so many points, who wouldn't be envious of Su Buxian? If they could share Su Buxian's points, many wouldn't even need to do the main quota to get extra points. He repeated, adding emphatically, after all, he really has too many points. No need to emphasize anymore. Su-Chi mused silently. It seems that my worth even exceeds the main quota. No need to say more, I'm in. It's everyone's responsibility to sanction Su Buxian, Su-Chi declared righteously. The young man gave a thumbs up. Good, good, good. Anyway, let's get to know each other. The young man introduced himself. My name is Ethan Dawn. The other party did not hide his identity, consistent with the information displayed above his head. Brother Chun, hello? Su-Chi paused and smiled. My name is Sunshine Cheerful Big Boy. Wait, why do the first two words sound so wrong? Ethan Dawn recalled the leaderboard and seemed to have never seen this name before. Many clubs also did not have this ID, and it couldn't be checked instantly in this instance. He felt certain now, it seems like an ordinary player. Anyway, welcome to join our Justice League. Although it was only proposed recently, most players responded enthusiastically. While it is to target Su Buxian, it also became a sizable force made up of solo players. I see. Ethan Dawn warmly patted Su-Chi's shoulder. Anyway, you won't regret your choice. I'll introduce you to the other members of our alliance when the time comes. Good, good, good. Su-Chi pointed ahead. Where are we heading now? It's a safe camp in this world. Ethan Dawn looked ahead, pausing. We directly appeared in this world, and have been probing this place for almost half a day now. Only then did we gather some information about this world and found safe places. Players like you are successors, entering here through the chaos of other worlds. But the advantage is, so many people working together, and the signs of chaos will alert the people at the safety camp and they will come to rescue. Other ordinary civilizations, that is to say. Su-Chi looked around at the anxious and nervous crowd. Not just those visible but countless worlds without abnormalities, sequences, divine powers, etc., also had similar portals of disappearances. Numerous people from different worlds have been accidentally brought here. No, it's not accidental. It resembles the early paradises, more like a large-scale selection? Su-Chi couldn't help but make a bold conjecture. Bringing lots of people from countless worlds. allowing them to interact with pollution, mutate, and thereby step onto the sequence path. It is speculative yet logical and terrifying. On deeper thought, the entire present world, incredibly vast. This undercurrent has been quietly ongoing for so long, covering such an expansive range, with abnormalities becoming visible everywhere over countless ages. As if invisible hands were orchestrating everything. Anyway, the safe camp is the only place where we can temporarily survive, said Ethan Dawn. After all, this world has totally collapsed, becoming the most terrifying and bizarre pollution instance. You should know about this. I've heard a bit. This instance seems somewhat special. What do you mean somewhat? It is very special. Ethan Dawn shook his head, educating Su Chi. A pollution crash instance means the entire world has completely broken down, occupied thoroughly by numerous pollutions, producing terrifying abnormalities everywhere. Other than a few safe zones, all other places have been completely devoured, filled with dangerous pollution monsters. He pointed at the current fog. That's why we need to act quickly, because staying outside too long will gradually pull you into spiritual pollution, constantly producing auditory and visual hallucinations, and even mental breakdown. As players, our spiritual energy can ward off some of it, but one would quickly lose spiritual power if one stays too long. Su Chi nodded. This sounds familiar. Anyway, anything could happen in a pollution instance. Since the main task hasn't appeared yet, many players are exploring and making contact with that powerful abnormal organization. Abnormal organization, huh? Su Chi looked toward Bald and those people. This world, as he said, was very dangerous, completely collapsed, almost signifying a horrific dead end. But an organization that managed to establish a safe haven here must be extraordinary. Moreover, the fact that this world frequently attracts crowds brought by various chaotic flows and can conduct rescues quickly signifies its order and power must be considered very strong. Chapter 211. It must be a huge creature. At that moment, Bald suddenly raised his hand, gesturing for everyone to stop. What's going on? Everyone paused, slightly startled and anxious. Shoo! Bald extended a finger, placing it upon his lips. His expression somewhat solemn as he looked into the distance. The mist wasn't too thick. Visibility was around 100 meters. Anything further became a vast white expanse. Danger is approaching. Ethan Dawn furrowed his brow gently. As a player who had appeared directly in this world, he had encountered more dangers than one might imagine and had seen many bizarre things. He knew this place was full of terrifying threats. Everyone held their breath. On their journey so far, they hadn't attracted much attention from monsters, encountering only the occasional scattered pollution monster which they readily dispatched, given their small numbers. However, Bald knew too well that those were insignificant pollution beasts without any ranking, barely posing a real threat. But now, a chill kept creeping into his heart. Although he saw nothing, his years of keen intuition told him there was a strange danger nearby. The best course of action now was to remain still. There were too many people present. They could fight against disorderly small beasts, but if they encountered some horrific and odd entity, its strange abilities alone could kill hordes of people. Su Chi looked into the distance, his spiritual eyes faintly gathering energy, allowing him to see a large, vague silhouette dragging its heavy steps closer. Its pace was neither fast nor slow, its movements like that of a stiff corpse, all the while accompanied by a frightening silence. It's coming. Someone near Bald frowned deeply, with bloodshot eyes. They too saw the existence 100 meters away. This is the one-eyed butcher. Through everyone's eyes, they beheld the pollution monster, standing 5 to 6 meters tall, skinless, with flesh and blood vessels exposed, holding a thorny iron spike. Everyone stay silent. No matter what happens, don't make any moves. Bald's expression changed. He immediately whispered urgently. The terrifying presence made everyone shiver. Just like themselves, pollution monsters also had various rules. Like the one-eyed butcher before them, it did not concern itself with static things, but any slight movement would trigger its ferocious bloodlust, continuing until everything turned into minced meat. The one-eyed butcher was slowly approaching. Its steps might have been slow, but the sense of oppression was intense. That eye, devoid of eyelids, drooping with blood vessels, watched everyone intently. It seemed to be observing. No one dared to move, even Bald and the others had sweaty palms. Such an entity was a great danger to them as well. "It's here." Ethan Dawn's expression also became tense. However, Su Chi's gaze wasn't fixed on the one-eyed butcher, but he looked past it, towards the distant mist, because there was an even more dangerous presence. And just then, within the surrounding mist, sudden, barely audible, sinister screeches emerged, as if fingernails were scraping a metal sheet. Ah! The piercing sound caused everyone's eardrums to ache, and they inadvertently let out a noise. They quickly came to their senses and covered their mouths in horror. But they realized that the one-eyed butcher hadn't charged at them. Instead, it stood quivering. In the next moment, the one-eyed butcher showed an expression of fear and quickly fled without looking back. Everyone was stunned. "What's happening?" The one-eyed butcher ran away. Bald, however, did not relax even a bit. His face grew even more somber as he listened to the sounds from the mist. What kind of terrifying creature must it be to make the one-eyed butcher flee without hesitation? The group waited a while, but still, nothing seemed to emerge from the mist. "Why hasn't it appeared yet? This screeching feels like it's right in front of us." Su Chi softly reminded. "Look, in the sky, there's a surprise." Ethan Dawn felt a shock and raised his head. As if he'd just fallen into an ice cave, he growled, "Damn it all to hell." Everyone else now also lifted their heads, their eyes splitting wide with terror, their hearts and livers trembling. 30 meters above their heads, there was a huge spider. Its limbs merged seamlessly with the fog in the distance and the forest. Its body loomed right above them, on top of which were countless compound eyes with various pupils rotating back and forth. Sizing them up, Ethan Dawn couldn't help but tremble and say, "Damn, did I not read the almanac today? Why are there horrifying creatures everywhere?" Indeed, the completely broken world was fraught with danger. But you couldn't just take a few steps and then face a terrifying existence that could annihilate everyone. Look on the bright side. Su Chi's gaze shifted upward. What if the other party is just friendly and curious? This is a polluted world. Where would you find any friendliness? Ethan Dawn nearly shouted. He said shakily, "I've only just begun, and I haven't even found that Su Bushian. Is it going to end already? Thinking of me so much?" Su Chi looked at the compound-eyed spider, a pollution monster with twisted spiritual characteristics. Its mere appearance caused others to experience terror, dangerous emotions, and then become its food. But spiritual power and pollution. Su Chi's eyes flickered slightly. Spiritual eyes brimmed with spiritual energy, emitting ripples, and an aura akin to that from the abyss condensed. High spiritual attribute combined with a simulation of the evil god's aura. The next moment, the giant spider's compound eyes trembled violently, and it let out a scream of terror, a hissing that exploded like a burst. Everyone felt dizzy and hurriedly covered their ears. Then, eyes widening, they watched the giant polluted spider, like the previous one-eyed butcher, flee madly without looking back. Its fear even surpassed that of the one-eyed butcher. What's going on? It just ran away like that? And it was scared off. Everyone was dumbfounded, utterly at a loss. Su Chi was also surprised for a moment. He hadn't expected the effect to be so strong. His own spiritual eyes naturally had a strong deterrent effect on all pollutants. After simulating a bit of the evil god's aura, he had originally intended to make the spider slightly stunned, giving everyone a chance to respond and escape. As a result, the opponent scampered off, wetting itself. The deterrent effect was that terrifying. Could it be? Su Chi hesitated for a moment. Did my title upgrade, making the simulation ability climb a level, Or was it after contact with the evil god's projection that the suppression effect of the spiritual eyes became even stronger? Simulation of aura was usually easy to see through for normal people. After all, having the aura without the strength led to many flaws. But, in this so-called dangerous polluted instance, all the terrifying monsters didn't have much of a brain. So then, I could potentially be their god. Ethan Dawn also looked in astonishment at the scene, turning to Su Chi. Did you feel a sudden chill just now, as if being pricked by numerous needles? A phantom pain? What is it? Su Chi asked knowingly. It means there must still be terrifying monsters nearby. At that moment, Bald also spoke up shakily. Everyone, we must immediately quicken our pace and swiftly leave this place. Everyone was mentally exhausted, nearing collapse, and all of them felt like they were on pins and needles, gripped with overwhelming fear, not just walking but starting to run, running faster and faster. Even Bald in front didn't stop. They've been affected. Su Chi looked at the others. And it seems quite serious. Why do I feel there's a risk of navigation error? You're still clear-headed, right? Damn right I am. I'm a professional. Ethan Dawn gritted his teeth. We've been in the fog for too long, and the successive disturbances have caused everyone an enormous amount of fear, on the brink of mental collapse. The emotions have a massive impact on the psyche. He looked ahead. Fortunately, the outpost is just ahead. This time, no incident occurred, and everyone dashed towards the outpost, gasping for air. They were like people fished out of water, soaked in sweat. Meanwhile, Su Chi slowly stopped his steps, his eyes fixing on the outposts. He looked somewhat puzzled. This emblem seems familiar. Chapter 212. The so-called stronghold was actually a circle of ritual constructed from various kinds of polluted flesh and blood. A faint light encased the entire abandoned mall. It seemed this instance was originally a peaceful and civilized world. Everyone, please enter the stronghold immediately. Do not linger. Each person must immediately register their name and information, as well as their abilities and the world they originally come from. The person speaking was a brawny man with a tiger's head. He too was affected by an abnormality, and naturally his appearance was unique. Different pollution sources determined different mutations. In addition, I want to remind you all of something. Now that you've come to this world, no matter how desperate you are, how reluctant, how much you want to return to your original world, please stay calm. Only by living well here will there be hope. The tiger-headed brawny man spoke calmly and then paused. So, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Final Home. Final Home, huh? Su Chi was also registering among the crowd. The entire mall had been transformed into a stronghold, a means of defense to prevent pollution from invading, just like that ritual outside. Those capable of using rituals must have come into contact with higher-level worlds and were undoubtedly powerful beings in this abnormal home. And that pattern. Su Chi turned his gaze again towards the flag in the middle. The pattern. It's familiar. I'm certain I've seen it before. It was in a small cabin on the diary of a little girl. A doodle drawn with crayons. A simple sunflower. The difference was that in his memory it was just a doodle, now it was much more elaborate. If it's not a coincidence, I might actually get to see an old acquaintance here. Ethan Dawn looked at Su Chi's gaze. You're very interested in this abnormal organization? Su Chi retracted his thoughts and laughed. A little bit, after all, this abnormal organization seems to be not that simple. Of course. Ethan Dawn paused for a moment, then said in a low voice, You know, having established a foothold in this polluted world, and built up strongholds, attracting all those brought to this world by the chaotic currents. To have developed to this point, it must be incredibly powerful. Su Chi could also tell that the stronghold was just one of the many temporary safety points scattered across the land, serving as a place for all abnormalities to find sanctuary, to prevent staying too long in the outside polluted world and turning completely into monsters. All right, let's not talk about this abnormal organization for the time being. I'll take you to meet our player group first. Although it's estimated there are more than 70 strongholds according to them, our player group is inevitably scattered. But the number of players in this stronghold is not small at all. The entire stronghold was a large mall, spacious and capable of accommodating a large number of abnormal people. At a glance, it was bustling with activity. Apart from the group of people from the airplane, other teams were also leading confused and anxious crowds inside. By rough estimate, there were at least close to 2,000 people. It was evident that this abnormal organization was indeed a massive force. Aside from the two of them who were player identities, there were also over 100 more gathered in a dilapidated hall. This is the bright and cheerful young man I met on a mission, a newcomer who has joined our Justice League. Ethan Dawn actually smiled. Su-Chi looked around. No familiar faces. Good. But it seemed that the player community was not all of the same mind, like the so-called Justice League that was only around 30 people. The other major players nearby were cold, calm, observing them as if watching a farce. The boring Justice League. Someone gently wiped their knife with cloth. Are you playing house? The people from the Justice League darkened. What did you say? A group of solo players, an assembled force, brandishing the banner of targeting Su-Bunshin, without even a clear idea of who the opposition is. Su-Chi looked at him. So, you know about the Su-Bunshin very well? Know about him? He said calmly. Just a nobody who lucked out on his way up. Why would I bother understanding him? As a member of a club, he knew that Abyssal Paradise couldn't possibly have cheats or bugs. Moreover, in his view, each world had different ways of acquiring points, and points didn't outright represent strength, especially such ludicrous amounts of points, which you can tell at a glance were not obtained through normal means. Many people shared his opinion, after a retrospection, that it was possible to find 1 in 10,000 shortcuts, to gain much higher points. This is a final ranking battle, which means some will be eliminated, contention will arise. The whole idea of hiding IDs is to let every player accumulate advantages as quickly as possible, so that once they are exposed, there will inevitably be killings and struggles. That's Su-Bunshin. The young man's gaze was level. Has long been targeted by the top clubs. The value of hundreds of millions of points is far greater than any action in this instance. Do you solo players really think you can compete? Ethan Dawn spoke sternly. Why can't we? Do you clubs that think yourselves superior really believe you can easily get everything you want? Sorry, but we'll find that Su-Bunshin before you. The young man. Not bad, you do have confidence, but in the end, it's just confidence. Ethan Dawn clenched his teeth. Hold on. At that moment, Su-Chi spoke up, and everyone's gaze shifted toward him. Of course, I'm just curious, merely curious, so I couldn't help but want to ask a bit more. Chapter 213. Su-Chi hesitated, then looked at them. Are you so sure you can easily take down Su-Bunshin? The young man glanced at Su-Chi curiously. Some others also nearly lost their composure. Otherwise, what? Is there any doubt? Now the elimination round rules haven't been initiated, and player IDs haven't been disclosed. That guy can hide among the crowd, but this is only temporary. A prey with no background or strength, facing countless top hunters in pursuit. I don't know how he could possibly escape. The young man put down the cloth he was using to wipe his knife, revealing a cold gleam. When the time comes, naturally the major top clubs will divide him up. After all, it's the survival of the fittest. The strong take it. The atmosphere in the hall wasn't good. The players weren't united, each having their own forces and camps. And Su-Chi, the center of the topic, even patted Ethan Dawn on the shoulder. Don't be influenced by them. Believe in us, the Justice League solo players. We will definitely be the first to find Su-Bunshin. Ethan Dawn was somewhat moved to be comforted in such a situation. Thank you. Don't mention it, Brother Chun. Ethan Dawn, why does that still sound so awkward? Su-Chi shifted his gaze. Let's change the perspective. He now really felt the atmosphere of everyone. That was a common hatred, united by a common purpose. All targeting him, quite proactive. Indeed, Over 100 million points are truly too tempting. Dispersing 100,000 points to each could distribute to more than 1,000 people. No wonder Left Hand, Sword, White Clothes, etc. all came to warn. And now he had become the target of everyone, even considered as prey that could be easily captured. Aren't you doing the main task anymore? What if the main task also gives a lot of points? And just at this moment, everyone, not just at this stronghold but also in other places, heard a faint ticking sound. Players looked puzzled. What's going on? It sounds like gears turning? No, it should be the sound of a clock moving. But many abnormalities calmly looked into the distance. It's the direction of Final Home, summoning all stronghold supervisors and high sequence to assemble. Has the manager returned? Not sure. But let's set off, hurry up. Anyone else who wants to head to the headquarters area can also come with us. We depart after 10 minutes. Su Qi paused slightly. Final Home, it seemed to be the core headquarters of the abnormal organization, as after all the strongholds were only temporary security spots. And most importantly, the manager they mentioned, who exactly is he? They also used the word return. This place is a polluted world, filled with terrifying dangers. It isn't somewhere to go off on a vacation. Return implies that this manager might have left this world? This information could explain the reasons for those rituals existing. After all, similar to production materials, they cannot be self-taught without instruction. The stronghold supervisor, a burly man with a tiger head, got ready to depart with a few powerfully present beings. These beings all belong to 7th rank. One shouldn't underestimate this breakthrough stage. The previous supervisors were enough to handle several players, let alone these abnormalities constantly fighting for survival between life and death. The players also paid attention to this scene. Although they still didn't know what the main task was, nor had any hints, each stronghold had tasks distributed, which after completion could earn spirit coins. This item, after the end of the previous instance, had become a well-known important currency. Thus, Ethan Dawn followed the team to the chaotic, fluctuating place for the rescue. And the tasks were varied, especially related to collection and combat, like various mutated plants, polluted weird grass, or killing monsters and bringing their bodies back. After submitting tasks and obtaining spirit coins, these were not just a useless gimmick. They could not only exchange for various resources, food, weapons, and tools in the headquarters area, but by crushing them, they could also utilize the energy within to enhance their strength. At the same time, they could also increase their chances of surviving in the pollution. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick. The clock ticking sound near everyone's ears slowly stopped. And just at that moment, all the players appeared slightly startled. A window popped up in front of everyone. Players in all fantasy districts of instance 213-7897, please pay attention. Now, I will announce the information that can be disclosed. Every player's vision was filled with a segment of CG and images. This world had already fallen into complete collapse a long time ago. The terrifying pollution did not extinguish all life. Various coincidences and errors have transformed this place into a point of abnormality for countless worlds, turbulence, missteps, life and death, sequence, unease. For everyone in this new era, it is a cruel chessboard and a great sifting of fates. A deep voice, as if a priest were holding his hands to his chest, reciting a prayer. Su Qi's gaze slightly shifted. Above it said, "Everyone, this statement doesn't specify a target. It means not only the players but also includes the abnormality, or perhaps the entire present world. Players, please note, the main quest of this instance is audience. This competition format will use an upward elimination system. The elimination mechanism will start in 2 days. Before it starts, killing other players will not earn you their points. All players with points exceeding 50,000 will have their coordinates periodically exposed. The higher the points, the darker the color of the coordinate marker. All players, please make every effort to enhance your performance." Many players looked slightly stunned. Some had flickering eyes. Others already had a sinister smile with murderous intent. All right. As everyone guessed, it's an elimination system. and it's expected to turn into fierce carnage. Similarly, the system also provided other ways to earn points. Killing an unordered monster, 100 points. Sequence 9 then is 5,000. For a Sequence 8 monster, 25,000 points. Completing tasks given by the abnormal organization can also yield quite a few points. This means they aren't considered targets, but entities we should attach ourselves to. Of course, even as targets, the players don't have the courage to take them on. Considering the abnormal organization's initial display of strength, why provoke such a behemoth? There's another point. Group battle players will receive points distributed according to their contribution. Most of them had already reached Sequence 9. After all, 10 is just a nominal sequence, generally referring to people who have just entered the path of sequences. Once the spiritual power is reached, one can step into Sequence 9. People could join forces to kill a Sequence 8 monster and share the points. This is also a sustainable path. No need to be so fiercely confrontational, killing each other. Actually, at this moment, someone murmured, the points earned from these tasks are really not as substantial as taking down that Su Buxian. Su Qi paused. Was he being targeted again? The others were also slightly startled and then realized. Right? A Sequence 8 monster is only 25,000 points. Those who could kill it single-handedly could be counted on one hand, not to mention the team sharing, the higher sequences they hadn't even considered, given that starting from Sequence 8, the chasm had already appeared. Rather than taking on such dangerous tasks, why not just snipe that Su Buxian? Several 100 million points, and not even a dangerous person. All right. After this main quest was announced, many players in the fantasy district were determined to find Su Buxian and plunder his points. Su Qi. Goodness. Now really ignoring the main quest. All the major other districts are in fierce slaughter, trying to peacefully increase their points according to the main quest. Just the fantasy district putting on a grand chase. And the sole target of the chase is himself. Chapter 214. What the hell are you estimating? All base leaders must head to headquarters, and quite a few abnormalities and players are prepared to follow. Because in the polluted world, dangers lurk everywhere. Although there generally exists a safe passage researched between each base and headquarters, having such strong individuals leading the way would certainly bring much reassurance. So many players are going? Of course, after all, there are still 2 days left. Sniping Su Buxian is important, but it's like a lottery. Who wouldn't covet that 100 million? It's just that the wolves are many and the meat is scarce, and every other move must also be made with full effort. Many players haven't put all their eggs in one basket. Su Buxian is indeed tempting, but after all, he is just one of the goals. Each person is also planning according to the system's mission instructions, starting to scheme, obtaining resources, and strengthening their own power. They're considering things comprehensively and for the long term. That Su Buxian is being targeted is inevitable. Points would definitely be plundered in the end, and when that time comes, it wouldn't be over no matter who scrambles for the billions of points. Gaining points is easy, holding on to them is hard. There's bound to be significant bloodshed. In the end, those capable of holding on, either the top clubs or superstar rookies, relying on their strength to fend off all covetous adversaries. Or those who seek to increase their advantage right now, looking for a backroad for themselves, capable of fleeing, hiding, can likewise manage to survive to the very end. So, for now, many players choose to follow into what's known as the Abnormal Organization headquarters, to probe for more information and connections. Half an hour later, many players followed the abnormalities summoned by the call, moving from the safe zone to reach final home. This is the Abnormal headquarters. Ethan Dawn and a group of players stood outside a massive area, looking forward in surprise. The so-called headquarters in front of them looked just like a normal urban area. There was no mist around. One could even see a large number of abnormalities walking in the streets. The so-called final home seems different from the terrifying pollution outside. Ethan Dawn muttered. Another ritual. Su Qi looked at the towering building in the center, which resembled a nuclear reactor, reaching high into the clouds, decorated with various rituals. emitting a faint aura of fluctuations that repelled any pollution. And this massive central building, it seems to be the heart of everything, containing a strange fluctuation inside. At this moment, many players began to scatter. The sound of the clocks signaling assembly meant that players from other bases would show up here as well, and naturally, they'd want to meet up with their own clubs first. What about us? The players of the Justice League paused slightly. Well. Ethan Dawn faltered for a moment. Next, we need to first look for the other players in our faction. How do we look for them? They were solo players, and while they had actively responded in the forums, they lacked not only power but also organizational and contact abilities compared to clubs. Moreover, most of them had never met in person. It's not like they could stand on the streets calling Justice League. Fall in. That would be no different from defecating in the street. No worries, I'm a core member. For now, we just need to find the big shots in our organization, Ethan Dawn said. Actually, some of the players didn't even know about this so-called Justice League thing. But when they heard that solo players were gathering to snipe at that Subushian, they joined decisively. One reason was the need for a faction to preserve themselves amidst the strife between clubs and the fighting of the superstar rookies, and the second was indeed the tempting points of Subushian. As Ethan Dawn said, he was a core member. This was also why Ethan Dawn had been persistently recruiting solo players along the way. But now he was a bit troubled while looking at the bustle of people before him. Troublesome. I didn't expect Final Home to be comparable to a small urban district. The number of abnormalities here is probably close to tens of thousands. Not just that. Su Chi said, this is almost like a small county town. The abnormal population must be at least over 100,000. Ethan Dawn was astonished. How do you know that? Well, Su Chi glanced into the distance. Judging from the extent of pollution isolation, the shape of the urban area around the center forms a circle. Considering the approximate distance of 3,234 meters from our entry point to the central building, we can use the simple equation pi r superscript 2 to calculate the total area of the urban district. Ethan Dawn's eyes gradually widened. What are you talking about? Why am I hearing math formulas? Don't rush. Su Chi spoke calmly. Just now, in the street district, I saw that there were thousands of abnormalities. To prevent error, I walked another street block to reobserve, and the difference in number was only around 4.4%. Moreover, within less than 500 meters, I saw 3 large garbage dumps, indicating a high population density and crowding. Therefore, after eliminating the blank streets and margin of error, I could estimate the entire headquarters population is definitely over 100,000. Ethan Dawn and the surrounding players looked stunned. This series of analyses had left them feeling completely baffled. That's just preposterous. In less than 10 minutes after we entered, did you really observe so much detail? Of course, but there's a trick to it. Chapter 215. Many players, including Ethan Dawn, couldn't help asking, what's the trick? Su Chi pointed behind him. That is, when I entered the city, I came across a local, and I casually asked a question. The expressions of the crowd changed, and then they all cursed, "Damn!" Ethan Dawn, gritting his teeth. "Damn it! You spoke so convincingly. I almost believed you. I thought you really figured it out by analysis. Turns out you just asked." Ethan Dawn, pressing his temple. "I really thought you had impressive observational skills. I was even ready to recommend you to our organization's founders. Much appreciated. Just bigging up a brother from the streets. Bigging up my ass." Ethan Dawn felt like he could almost yell out loud. "Chill, weren't you looking for an organization? I suggest," Su Chi said, "go straight to the central area. That's where missions are exchanged, and spirit coins can be redeemed. It must be a hub for the abnormal people, and other players will probably head there too." What kind of words are these? Ethan Dawn paused. Did you just ask this as well? Almost. Su Chi had seen it. People represent information, and with a city full of abnormalities, there's an overwhelming amount of information. But from what Su Chi could see, the words manager appeared most frequently. not as a curse or out of fear, but filled with reverence and gratitude towards this manager. Su Qi's gaze flickered as he pondered inwardly. This so-called final home, although crowded, still has empty streets left clear, which doesn't feel oppressive. Even in a polluted world, he looked at everything he saw on the streets. Food isn't scarce, life is secure, and various goods are traded within order and rules. In such a heavy place, you can see traces of life. Su Qi then paused. This manager is impressive. One thing needs to be clear. This is not an area of daily life, but an organization fighting for survival. All kinds of abnormalities are members of this organization, protecting their final home here, so it's vital that each abnormality plays a role and receives rewards and feedback. There's not much infighting, fully reflecting a united organization atmosphere. The most important point is to care for the emotions of all the abnormalities. After all, this is a polluted world, and the slightest mental instability can greatly amplify, gradually leading to collapse and madness. Su Qi grew increasingly interested in the manager, wondering if it might be the person he had in mind. In any case, now he and the others were also heading towards the central area, moving closer to the towering building that reached into the clouds. It seems I miscalculated. There are even more people here, Su Qi murmured to himself. Ethan Dawn coughed and looked around, his gaze sharpening slightly. Indeed, it looks like many players are here. I see some familiar faces. The other members rejoiced. Are they from our alliance?
No.
Ethan Dawn stated decisively. These are the well-known figures from the rankings, top clubs, superstar newcomers, beta players. Su Qi. Really? I haven't seen a single one. This time there really were no acquaintances. Everyone he had matched with before had ended up in other districts. Nonsense, Ethan Dawn said seriously. After all, I am someone in the top 300 of the Fantasy District rankings. The other players were stunned. That's amazing. Most solo players are ordinary people with rankings tailing off at the end. Just like game rankings, most are in bronze and silver. Hearing someone is in king or master tier naturally feels impressive, not to mention professional players. Impressive, Su Qi echoed monotonously. Your impressive came out so emotionless. But Ethan Dawn was not boasting. Anyway, since we're here, I'll try to make contact first, Ethan Dawn said. He had an investigation skill and, as a core member, it appeared he had other ways to contact the big shots. Su Qi felt the fluctuations of his skill. Although he called himself a solo player, it was clear he knew more than others. Even though the Fantasy District was generally the weakest of the 12 districts in terms of overall strength, being in the top 300 on the leaderboard was enough to prove this guy really had something. Found it. Ethan Dawn's eyelids twitched slightly. The big shot has responded to me, at a location in the square. Su Qi also saw other members of the Justice League, roughly 100 people. Their strength was somewhat pessimistic, many of them still stuck at Sequence 10, a level that could hardly be considered a hurdle. However, he also saw the so-called initiators of the Justice League. A middle-aged man wearing a black cowboy hat with tattoos, and another was a slender young man with a slight smile in his eyes. Justice Chief and Penelope Bloom. Very well. The second and third on the leaderboard joining forces to launch a strike against their own alliance. Didn't expect there to be so many people. It seems this choice was the right one. Justice Chief and Penelope Bloom were quietly conversing. They were two internal testers, each with their own real forces back in paradise. There weren't many people in the public test clubs either. Although most were top-notch in strength, they were unfortunately assigned to other districts. So, in this fantasy district, compared to other top clubs that had nurtured many elites, they were at a disadvantage. Moreover, both had high scores which could attract unwanted attention. At that moment, a guy named Su Buxian, with his efforts alone, had stolen all the limelight. Although they lost out on the reward for first place, they took the opportunity to establish this alliance, creating an advantage for themselves. The core personnel were roughly 5 people, all newcomers cultivated by their forces. Ethan Dawn seemed quite core indeed. He waved his hand as the spokesperson, invigorating and organizing everyone. Next, I suggest everyone take on a task to earn points. Focus around Location 54, which can also serve as our contact. If anyone encounters any problems, we can all contribute ideas and strategize together. Many of the ordinary players seem to have a lot of faith in these two, with an enthusiastic response. So hasty? It seems that as long as you have strength and a place on the leaderboard, you can create momentum without saying anything. Su Qi observed the scene. And to think, with his far-leading score, he hadn't enjoyed such prestige? After many of the players eagerly dispersed, about 10 people, including Su Qi who had stayed on his own accord, were left behind. With the points he had, there was no need to bother with so-called tasks. To deal with the multitude who coveted his position, he naturally had to take an unconventional approach. "Boss!" Ethan Dawn called out to Penelope Bloom. Now he knew where his loyalties lay. "These are the 10 people you told me to keep." Penelope Bloom looked at the people behind Ethan Dawn, nodded with satisfaction, and said with a gentle smile, "I'll leave the rest to you." Someone was stunned for a moment, curiously asking, "What do we have to do?" "Fight. There's nothing you need to do, no danger. Just follow us, and you don't even have to speak. After it's over, I'll give each of you 5 spirit coins." The people were taken aback, not yet comprehending. After all, we'd like to make contact with the high-level members of the abnormal organization. Justice Chief was not one to beat around the bush, calmly saying, "I can feel that your abilities are probably the strongest among everyone here. So we need to show some power." He naturally had an investigation skill as well, probing spiritual energy sequences, although it was only a general outline since the upper limit was very low. These 10 people may not compare to other superstar newcomers, but they were obviously giants among the shorter players. Moreover, Justice Chief looked at the other top clubs, who had not left to take on tasks either. They seemed to share the same intent. Chapter 216. It turns out to be my house? All the top clubs had started to make their moves. Every gaze held more or less a sense of confrontation. What are you scheming? Why ask when you already know? The fluctuations of ritual, traces of other worlds, along with various currents bringing a multitude of abnormalities. All this indicates that the abnormal organization can contact higher-level worlds, and it's not straightforward. Aside from gaining advantages in this instance, everyone wanted to establish contact with it. In fact, previously, very few ordinary players who experienced various instances attempted to establish a deep connection with the forces within the instances. After all, the instances were short-lived, and many ordinary players believed they wouldn't have a second chance to enter the instances, so they generally did not pay much attention to this matter. But with the introduction of the reputation system and the release of the Paradise datasheet preview, followed by a non-independent instance, numerous ordinary players were exposed to various forces. Everyone then realized that the great world was so vast. The major top clubs were backed by the Paradise Force, so their understanding was naturally more detailed. To stand out in Paradise, one needed not only strength but also reputation and social graces. Making contact with various major forces and establishing connections was beneficial to themselves and their higher organizations. Moreover, the most important thing was everyone had stopped in front of the central building right now. The central building looked somewhat mismatched, like it was assembled from various architectures. One could vaguely see what seemed to be a massive apartment in the middle. The gilded black casing that extended into the towering sky gave an odd feeling. And there was something special here, because a large black gate bore a sign. Last house notice. 1. This is the only redemption of Final Home. 2. Note that non-sequencers may not enter. 3. Please strictly follow the instructions. 4. Those who reach the end, please await the manager's review before joining the Guardian team. Manager's memo. Death, extremities, pollutants, yet capable of inspiring everyone's potential. Please keep the anger and the hope of living, and protect our last home. This was the notice given by the central building. If one wanted to reach the high ranks of the abnormal organization, one must follow the procedure. But it was precisely because of such notices that people saw the opportunity to contact the higher-ups. Now, it was just a matter of whether it was possible or not. So many people want to enter? The abnormal guarding the gate looked at the numerous players with a flickering gaze, but it did not ask further. The rules were set by the manager, and its duty was just to instruct. Spoke softly. The last house represents a trial to test everyone's abilities and their heart to protect the final home. Once you can pass, it signifies that you are very likely to become a guardian and possibly even meet with the manager. The so-called guardians are the core members of the final home, not only responsible for leading the battle organization but also holding higher statuses and resources. Su Qi murmured to himself. In a home filled with abnormalities, yet a clear hierarchy of rewards and punishments is established. This is not an oppression but a method to spur everyone's desire to grow stronger from life to death. Whether from the management perspective or the control of the current situation, it has been excellently handled, very good indeed. Kissing up to the manager like this isn't the way to do it, Ethan Dawn criticized. You sound like an inspecting leader. Penelope Bloom looked forward. They have already gone in, let's follow. Su Qi's gaze also moved away from the apartment that was faintly visible within the patchwork structure and stepped forward. As the door closed with a loud rumble, they had entered this central building, last home. So dark. There are no lights, and it's so cold. Upon entering here, everyone clearly felt an abrupt drop in temperature, sending chills over their bodies. This is the scent of pollutants. It seems extremely dense and dangerous, with various terrifying scents faintly encroaching from all directions. The players' gazes hardened. They hadn't expected to find such intense pollution at the center of the supposedly pollution-isolated final home. What on earth is going on? The place in front of their eyes was a wide and spacious hall. It looked quite unremarkable. The hanging crystal chandelier was burning with candlelight to provide brightness for everyone. The bright red carpet was immaculate, and a large staircase connected to the second floor, where another door seemed to be waiting for them. But at this moment, no one moved. Various wary and apprehensive expressions appeared, because they felt something uncanny and dangerous. No one dared to make a rash move. 1. To gather information, leaving time to probe. 2. The place was eerie, and danger seemed to lurk everywhere. No one wanted to be the first to take the risk. For a time, the area had fallen silent. Someone looked at others with an amused gaze, speaking in a profound tone. Everyone, stop staring. Instead of staring each other down, let's rely on our own skills. This person was wearing a half-mask, with red and blue stripes intermingling on the mask, looking quite peculiar, and no one knew what lay behind it. But as he began to speak, Chapter 217, Penelope Bloom and the Justice Chief, including other top club members, all looked at this person with wary expressions. This was Ghost-Faced Magician. As previously discussed in the forum, points don't necessarily represent strength, because the rules for earning points vary from region to region and from instance to instance, especially in the illusion region. The rules for earning points are all over the place. Penelope Bloom and Justice Chief were not considered the strongest players in terms of combat ability. Even though they were ranked second and third, it was because they were exceptionally lucky and skillful in that instance that they managed to achieve such rankings and points. That's exactly why. The two immediately chose to ally in this instance and formed the Justice League, brandishing the banner of sniping Subushian, to build an advantage for themselves. Don't all look at me with that kind of gaze, huh? The ghost-faced magician held a wand in his hand, showing an abnormal smile as he tapped it. We haven't even reached the so-called stage for fighting. Do you really want to start a fight now? His tone was quite peculiar, as if he viewed each player with the eyes of a hunter. Right now, isn't it better for everyone to get along and rack up some more points? Keep in mind that everyone present was no ordinary individual, and at this moment, being spoken to in such a way, some were angry, some were seething with murderous intent. The previous trepidation was ultimately due to this person's formidable strength and background, and once their anger was provoked, how could the super newcomers and the prideful ones just swallow their pride and endure? Ding-a-ling-a-ling. At that moment, a crisp sound rang throughout the hall. Their expressions slightly startled. They saw a bell hanging next to a remote display cabinet in the hall, gently swinging and ringing. Please pay attention. The detailed rules for the hall are now being announced. After completing the various cleaning and tidying tasks, you may proceed to the next area. This voice sounded as if it had been altered, sounding suppressed and grave, with no discernible tone or gender, but it carried a chill that ran deep, as if warning them, "Don't fight here." The crowd fell silent, including the ghost-faced magician who frowned slightly, adept in spiritual power, yet at this moment felt as if he had entered into chaos, powerless. And quickly, the detailed rules were read out one by one, sounding like extremely simple tasks, such as replacing candles for crystal lamps, touching up dye on carpets, washing dishes in the kitchen, and so on. The crowd's eyes narrowed slightly. None of them took this lightly. No one was foolish, and anyone with a brain knew that these so-called simple tasks were definitely full of strangeness. "Let's get started as well," Penelope Bloom spoke softly. "Although there are dangers, it shouldn't lead to death. After all, these are trials formed by a multitude of abnormalities." At that time, Ethan Dawn suddenly exclaimed, "Wait, boss!" "What?" Ethan Dawn looked at the people behind him, his expression off. "It seems we're missing someone." He did not find Su-Chi's figure in the team. "That guy. Gone. When did it happen?" Penelope Bloom's expression froze. "I didn't pay attention just now. We can be certain of one thing. He must have disappeared when we just entered and couldn't see anything," Justice Chief stated with focus. "Anyway, from now on, everyone be careful. This is a dangerous place filled with pollutants. Anything could happen." Meanwhile, Su-Chi was now in an inexplicable darkness, his night demon gene allowing him to utilize the night vision function, enabling a clear view of all his surroundings in the darkness. He saw very clearly. As soon as he stepped into the dark hall, an odd twisted strength had transported him away from the hall, and what was in front of him now was a spacious room. Although it was all dark, Su-Chi wasn't panicked at all. He looked towards the silhouette in the distance and said, "Controlling the whole last house. Surely you can afford the electric bill." A timid voice echoed in the room. "It's not that I don't want to turn on the lights. I'm afraid I might scare you." Su-Chi smiled lightly. "Since you've brought me here, it'd be impolite to remain hidden." Very well then." A flicker of light began to glimmer, and the brightness of the entire room made Su-Chi squint his eyes. "The girl that appeared before my eyes resembled a little girl, except that her limbs, including her neck, faintly showed traces of being stitched together. She looked like a doll, yet also like some abnormality. At first glance, it definitely had the effect of the uncanny valley." "Aren't you scared?" The little girl was quite young, her voice tinged with surprise as she looked at Su-Chi, whose expression hadn't changed. Su-Chi sized her up. "Why should I be scared? The hand sewing technique is pretty good, though the neck could use some improvement." The little girl fell silent, her expectations dashed. "Do you still recognize me?" "Of course you are," Su-Chi began to say, but then realized he truly didn't know, quickly pivoting. "Anyways, it's been a long time." The little girl fell silent again. Her young mind unexpectedly struck twice. "It's been a long time. Brother Su Buxian." Su-Chi certainly recognized her, but it was understandable that he couldn't remember her name. This was the second instance. His first time entering a contaminated world, the apartment where he encountered Tentacle Man. Tentacle Man. Back when he managed the apartment, he had made one rule, which was no entry to the third floor. Because inside the third floor was where his daughter's body was kept. Of course, it couldn't be called a body, given his daughter's consciousness was still there, and he had successfully gotten Tentacle Man to speak with his daughter. Then, Tentacle Man agreed to cooperate with him, helping him to enter the source of collapse and to successfully retrieve the ancient god's heart. At that time, he had made his daughter call him Brother Su Buxian. Here, the most crucial point. It was then that Su Qi, upon leaving the instance, handed over the temporary prop, broken pocket watch to Tentacle Man. This item could isolate 90% of the pollution. Back then, I just gave it as a small gesture. I never expected him to go this far, much less to meet again. The pattern he had seen entering the stronghold was also the one doodled in the little girl's diary. And the sound of the clock calling all the supervisors and the high-sequence individuals probably came from that broken pocket watch. After entering the urban area, Su Qi immediately recognized the central building's apartment style. He was almost certain by then. I've come back home. He wasn't wrong to say that, considering he was also one of the residents here. Brother Su Buxian, why have you come back? I specifically came back to check on you all, Su Qi said unabashedly and laughed. Also, these 3 words, don't go spreading them around for the next few days. The little girl was pretty obedient and nodded her head. Was this more polite than the youthful form of the master of destruction who tended to get bristly? I just didn't expect that after I left. Your father still didn't give up on that idea. And now it seems he has truly accomplished it, even establishing such a vast abnormal organization. After Su Qi confirmed this was the old place, his observations of the organization's condition and Tentacle Man's reputation as manager were indeed exceptional. That guy really was quite capable. It's all because of Brother Su Buxian, whether it's me or everything here. It's all thanks to the watch you gave my dad that we have today, the little girl said earnestly. My dad said, he's incredibly grateful to you, and even left a portrait of you here, saying that if there's a chance to meet again one day, he would definitely repay you. We could talk about repaying the favor. Wait a second. Su Qi paused. Your dad left a portrait of me? Doing something so sentimental? The little girl nodded. Yes, it even has your name, Brother Su Buxian, on it. It's in the last house. My dad said he wanted everyone to know that you are the source of all hope here. Every guardian holds a deep reverence not only for my father but for you as well. Su Qi. Chapter 218. Su Buxian's visit here. In the dimly lit corridor, countless rooms were tightly shut, devoid of light, with visibility extending only about 2 meters around. Ethan Dawn and Penelope Bloom walked together. The former was tense, while the latter's eyes were solemn. This place, what exactly is going on? It was hard enough to reach the 2nd floor, but it feels like we've entered a ghostly corridor where we just keep going in circles. Ethan Dawn was shivering slightly. They had been separated from others and had stepped into what was so-called the 2nd floor. Yet they couldn't find their way out, with only the dark environment and one sealed room after another. Penelope Bloom was the calm one who spoke. The others are probably in the same situation, and it seems the exit is inside one of the rooms. We'll have to try each one. Some doors wouldn't budge, while others revealed a variety of things once opened. The walls, strange paintings and bandages, pulsating pus bags embedded in the wall, filled with the abnormal and the horrific. The dark corridor echoed their heavy footsteps. They cautiously approached a door. This door seems like it can be opened. Ethan Dawn paused briefly and reached out to push the handle. The door creaked open, revealing a gap leading into pitch darkness, where nothing inside could be seen. But the next moment, a rapid whooshing sound suddenly burst forth. Countless bandages surged out from within, wrapping towards both of them. Be careful. Penelope Bloom's expression hardened as she suddenly stretched out her hand and pulled out a blade, releasing spiritual energy to slice through the bandages. At that moment, the corridor lights flickered, and a bandaged man, wrapped entirely in bandages and standing in a space smeared with bloodstains, stared intently at them with an eerie gaze. It seems this is an entity we must fight. After all, Penelope Bloom looked around at the corridor. The walls on both sides had somehow become sealed again. There's no escape now. In other locations, many players faced the same predicament. Each encountered a variety of doors, revealing a completely different abnormality upon opening. Meanwhile, in the little girl's room, Su-Chi also watched the scene unfold through the phantasmal images. Tentacle Man really knows how to draw inspiration. These abnormalities seem like illusions, but they possess tangible substance, lethal power, and traits, and there are familiar faces among them. For instance, the bandaged man, the first one to fixate on him when he entered the apartment, who he then stuffed into a refrigerator. Then there was the captured split-mouth woman and the swollen man. That's right, the little girl nodded. These were all tenants who once lived in my father's apartment. Since my father kept parts of their bodies stored in the apartment, they could be used as material. And they are spiritual bodies constructed by rituals, lacking self-awareness, but much stronger than before. That's evident. Su-Chi watched as players were separated by the corridors, engaging in combat. That guy is really a researcher after all. After all, it had taken Tentacle Man less than 10 days to create an artificial life form, a pollution composite which helped him successfully draw the attention of those terrifying pollution monsters and reach the heart of the collapse. Pollution, rituals, isolation, abnormality. Looks like he's been through a lot. And Su-Chi looked at the little girl. You haven't vanished like you did at first. He couldn't bear to give up on you in the end. It seems he made a lot of effort. He remembered that the little girl he saw on the 3rd floor had only a head, and a spirit-like consciousness only capable of communicating through abnormal means, but now she not only had a body, but could also talk and move. However, Su-Chi looked at her. Your current body is still in bad shape, isn't it? He didn't even need to use a question mark to see. Merely from the stitching marks on the little girl's body, and from the scent beneath the doll appearance, all indicated her current condition. The fresh stitching suggested that she had to be taken apart often. Inside the doll was a smell of blood and decay. More importantly, the little girl had barely moved since the beginning, her body like it had rusted, completely incapable of moving like a normal person, all movements extremely awkward. I didn't expect Big Brother Su Buxian to notice. The little girl struggled to lift her arm. She touched her own abdomen, like ripping a layer of covering fabric. Inside was flesh imbued with an abnormal aura, various neurological tubes connecting it. This was unmistakably Tentacle Man's handiwork. Aside from her head, her body's external appearance was that of a doll, but in reality, it was filled with abnormal flesh, simply stitched over with a less terrifying facade. At first, that pocket watch could remove the contamination from the flesh. Then, with my father's neurological surgery, I was given life. Until now, I have gradually been able to move, only needing to replace my body every week. And I can control all of the rituals and pollutants of the last house. My father is amazing, right? The little girl showed a relaxed and proud smile. Su-Chi didn't speak, but he saw a mixture of heaviness and reluctance in her smile. It seemed the legacy of history was still present. He had to admit Tentacle Man had succeeded in reviving his daughter, and she could talk and stay by his side. But she was no longer a normal person, not even human anymore, but a puppet attached to this building. Chapter 219. That guy must have fought with his life, day and night, crazily researching, but it seems he still faced restrictions. A terrifyingly protective father. Su-Chi had reason to believe that the driving force behind establishing such a huge final home probably stemmed from how to fully revive his daughter and return her to normal. Su-Chi didn't continue on this topic but asked, "Where has your dad gone now?" He knew that the so-called manager of Final Home was Tentacle Man, and he had also heard from the person in charge of the stronghold that he wasn't here right now. I don't know. The little girl shook her head. Daddy usually doesn't talk much about work. He would occasionally mention it, only talking about that place. Right? The little girl paused. He also mentioned a word, called chaos. Chaos. Su-Chi closed his eyes slightly. As a hustler, he often exercised his memory, which allowed ordinary people to have extraordinary memory through specific methods and notations. He had done similar things, with details of information lingering in corners of his brain. Sometimes a single word could trigger his recollection. I remember now. Su Chi squinted his eyes. Russell. On that spaceship, I had encountered Split-Mouth Woman, Swollen Man, two former apartment residents. At that time, I wondered why they appeared on the ship, becoming a part of the cargo. Russell said, it was purchased in a place called Chaotic City. And now it seems, all the threads seem to have connected. At that time, someone had descended into this world, taking away Split-Mouth Woman, Swollen Man, and even a large number of other things, and the place of sale was that Chaotic City. And Tentacle Man had also taken this opportunity to connect with it. This also explained where all the rituals I've seen now came from. They were probably all purchased by Tentacle Man from Chaotic City, obtained in exchange. After all, according to what Russell said at the time, in Chaotic City, as long as you had money, you could buy anything. No wonder he was able to build such a large abnormal organization in just 2 years, and also set up various missions, managing the abnormalities, unifying spirit coins, and so on. So this was how he started. Most of the missions were to hunt down pollution monsters, because the pollutants and carcasses of the pollution monsters contained energy, which could be converted into spirit coins through certain means. This way, he gradually developed from insignificance, stockpiling spirit coins, and then exchanging them in Chaotic City. Moreover, judging by Tentacle Man's reputation throughout Final Home, he had spent his money wisely. He indeed sheltered all abnormalities. Since I left, it's been 2 years. To achieve this extent in 2 years, that's quite impressive. Wait, it seems like I took down illegal land in just 10 days, and if all goes well, Night City should also be almost under control. Su Chi shook his head. Then he still needs to practice. The little girl looked at Su Chi, shaking his head. Puzzled. What's wrong? Nothing. Your dad should be back soon, right? Yes. The little girl nodded. Time-wise, it should be in these few days. Dad's trips usually last about a month each time. Su Chi. Okay. I got it. He pointed to the illusionary screen. What's their process right now? Gradually defeat various tenants, then go through the twisted rooms of pollutants, and then fall into the terminal illusion ritual. This step is actually to see if there are any abnormalities harboring ill intentions. I record the images and give them to my father to personally review. My father said he doesn't trust many people, so he wants to review them himself. The little girl tilted her head. This guy. In these 2 years, he had evolved from an apartment manager into a true leader of an abnormal organization, the manager of the Final Home. My portrait with my name on it, where does it appear? In the final boss's room. That's where Little 8 stays. Little 8. That's the new species you and father created together, Brother Su. Oh, the pollution composite, right? Su Chi smiled. Do me a small favor. What help do you need? The little girl was quite eager. Other than meeting her own father, she had no one else to talk to, and her father was usually very busy with his research, traveling, and managing Final Home and such. She wouldn't normally reveal her horrifying appearance outside, often just staying alone in the attic. Her father had also warned her quite a bit, saying not to expose herself easily. But Brother Su was one of their own. He was a trustworthy companion that her father mentioned. That's also why as soon as she sensed the ritual, she immediately couldn't help but bring him here. That is, hide the painting and replace it with a blank piece of paper, and also add a sentence to it. The little girl was stunned. What sentence? Su Buxian was here. Night had fallen. Players in the base were resting. This time they were divided according to their own faction camps. Most of the people from Justice League gathered at Base 54. The faint campfire carefully spread a trace of light. Good news. We've passed the so-called trials and have become temporary guardians, with access to higher-level missions and the ability to obtain spirit coins. Bad news. We haven't met with the manager yet. It seems the person hasn't returned, so we must complete even more tasks than before. More good news. We've discovered Su Buxian's whereabouts. But the bad news is he only left a message. The first sentence is, Su Buxian was here. Su Chi looked at Ethan Dawn, who was sitting in front of the campfire, chattering away. How arrogant can you be? It's more than just arrogance. Ethan Dawn cursed. It's practically a slap in the face of all the players. Mind that many players are following his trail and have put out the word. They want to take away those hundreds of millions of points. Normal people would have been hiding, ducking and dodging all over the place, but this guy dares to show up and even entered there ahead of time. You weren't there at the time. It's too bad you didn't see it. The expressions of all those powerful players present changed. Su Chi spread his hands. There's nothing I can do. I failed halfway, so I got sent out. Although everyone who remained had strong abilities, the various tests set by Tentacle Man were not simple either, and many players from top clubs were kicked out halfway. And Su Chi, of course, was among them. He hadn't aroused any suspicion either. It takes a certain kind of person to dare take such a risk and provoke others like that. Penelope Bloom spoke softly. However, it's because he hasn't been exposed yet. There's one more day of safety left. Once it's over, he'll probably be on the run everywhere. Justice Chief spoke calmly. Anyway, let's just wait quietly. Of course, don't forget to do the missions as well. Every person who enters the trial and successfully passes should take a group to complete it. One can gain higher points and rewards and even improve performance. It seemed that this was also taken into account by the system's judgment. At least on this point, they were also being honest with solo players. After everyone dispersed, Su Chi in the base stretched himself lazily. Indeed, there's only one day left. Su Chi murmured to himself. There's still much to do, although Final Home has many abnormalities. Most people are just ordinary people who were distorted by pollution after being caught in the currents. 90% of the people haven't even stepped onto the sequence, and the real Guardians don't even number in the hundreds. That was also why there were only a bit more than 70 bases established. Don't think everything seems orderly now. According to the little girl, Final Home faces various crises, and isolating pollution requires a massive amount of energy every day. As the frequency of abnormalities increases, this burden grows heavier. The requirement for pollution monster carcasses and the consumption of spirit coins are huge. So, Su Chi naturally had to mobilize every player. Players, becoming guardians, all high-risk hunting and extermination tasks could be handed over to these people, which could greatly alleviate the pressure on Final Home and also collect various materials. Don't underestimate this group of players. If they really banded together to round him up, Su Chi would still have to put in quite the effort to wipe them out. Of course, the most important thing is, Tentacle Man may manage well and put in every effort, but if this continues, Final Home will probably collapse sooner or later. The growing crowd of abnormal people, the steadily expanding consumption. He needs the intervention of the abnormal organization. Chapter 220. If you don't do it, there are plenty who will. A large number of players were diving deep into the polluted fog, undertaking various tasks. While earning points, they could also obtain spirit coins. They had already understood the importance of these items, which not only contained energy for setting up rituals and activating tools, but could also be used for sequence enhancements. Moreover, they were a crucial currency in the present world. Besides the system-assigned points for killing enemies and completing tasks, there was also money to be made. So the players really went all out. Brother Bushian, wow. They are really impressive, and they're working so hard. In the secret room of the last house, little Ah Ling watched in some surprise as pollutants filled the entire last house and produced spirit coins. Little Ah Ling was the nickname for the little girl. Starting from yesterday, all the players, almost like locusts, cleared and fought through the fog, not only greatly relieving the pressure on the nearby strongholds and guardians, but also, after the daily consumption of pollution at the last house was replenished, there was even a surplus. This is because, Su Chi spoke, they are all players. Players. Just a bunch of unorganized, undisciplined guys who don't wash their hands after using the toilet. Of course, this primarily referred to ordinary players. Though the polluted world was extremely dangerous and monsters were rampant, as long as there were sufficient benefits and competition, The pleasure and commitment they derived were even higher than one might expect. After all, many people truly played Abyssal Paradise as a game where death penalties weren't a big deal. Furthermore, among all the players who entered this world, the majority were solo players, hence the significant increase in the transportation of pollution monster carcasses and various materials. While the top players, who deeply understood the uniqueness of Abyssal Paradise, with enough points, didn't chase after the number of tasks nor hunt the unsequenced monsters. Instead, they teamed up to kill many 7th-rank creatures, which rapidly increased their points. However, in terms of resource output, they were no match for the solo players. Brother Sue, are all these your comrades? I didn't expect them all to be so capable. Before, the abnormalities that appeared were ordinary people, and it would take hundreds of them before even one could have a chance at entering a sequence. You could say that. Su Chi said with a calm smile. The reason I kept it hidden is because I hold a high rank in their hearts. Once I reveal my name, many would immediately follow me instead of completing their tasks. So now is not the time to reveal my identity. Little Ah Ling didn't understand, but she had great trust in Su Chi and quickly nodded. After all, just one day had already proven that Brother Bushin had truly helped reduce a great deal of pressure on the final home, and the output had significantly increased, keeping up with the ritual consumption in a short time. Player? Who reduced the pressure? Do you even know what you're talking about? Su Chi then asked, how is the progress now? Although various leaders, according to Tentacle Man's management log left in advance, were cleaning up around the final home and maintaining the strongholds to keep the core of the last house operational. In reality, all the macro control was still handled by Little Ah Ling. She managed all the rituals, including those at the stronghold. Whether this ability was a natural talent or accidentally created by the Broken Pocket Watch wasn't clear. She learned quite a bit about management from Tentacle Man. Her speech was also very methodical. The range of pollution monsters near the final home has noticeably decreased, and we've also cleared a small part of the unordered monster nests along the safe roads connecting to the nearest strongholds. Good, Su Chi mused. Next, let's arrange some clearing tasks near the strongholds. Tasks were endless. After all, the final home faced a pollution tide, and unordered monsters were as numerous as rats, impossible to exterminate in a short time. Also, give me a map of the northwest direction of the final home. When he first entered the final home, Su Chi saw, in the northwest, a huge deep red exclamation mark that the fog couldn't block. The exclamation mark indicated there was an Easter egg for him to trigger. Deep red indicated extreme danger. Of course, he was accustomed to this color. But Little Ah Ling was slightly puzzled. Why? Do you need this? Father said those places are extremely dangerous areas. Gigantic crises that the final home currently can't handle, and all guardians avoid those forbidden lands. Because of this, those areas were sealed off and all strongholds kept their distance. Su Chi paused. So, you've never issued related tasks there? Yep. Little Ah Ling nodded. It's too dangerous. Unless Father personally brings the guardians to gather materials, no one would take on such tasks voluntarily. Who says no one? Su Chi patted her little head. I'll take it. Tentacle Man was not at home. As his longtime friend, and as Little Ah Ling's big brother, he had to seek some excitement. Little Ah Ling was stunned. But, that place is super dangerous. Brother Su, you alone? Su Chi shook his head. Don't worry. I'm not alone. And my comrades, he said with a light smile. You've seen their prowess, trust me. My comrades will spare no effort to help me.